Beautiful. We are rolling.
Hey, listen, take the nigga out the hood, but can't take the hood out the nigga. Hey, bro, you know what? That reminds me. I was talking to this artist that I met at a venue that I'm not going to promote, and and we were in the DMs, and he asked me. He was like, "Yo, what would you say?" Because he's really tapped into my content. And over time, it's like I've seen him get more and more engaged and more excited about it. He frequently talks about, like, he works with kids at a youth program. He's been a teacher for like a number of years. I think it's like 6 years. So he often talks about how some of the things that I say would be really good for the kids to hear and obviously impactful to him and whatever. And yesterday he hit me up about, I don't even remember what it was that I posted. Oh, it was the spirituality thing, right? So I'm going in, I do the post, we're talking about like the Malachi name and all that. And he responds to that, and he's like, "Hey man, what do you think would be like the main or the biggest misconception about you in the space that you're in?" Meaning like the spiritualism stuff. And I said that there were two things. The first was that people assume in being spiritual, I'm somehow above my human experience, which comes from, I think, a lot of like oppressive deliveries of religion and spirituality. So like we were just talking about this, the idea that there's a moral parallel between living in poverty and like kind of like having the least amount of like economic power and a high level of spiritual connection or practice. And then on the other side, you have this assumption of like high levels of material is like, okay, you're so present here, you can't possibly be thinking beyond that. You can't possibly be thinking spiritually. And so I've started to even like look at, maybe I'm looking at everything with extremes, like the binary. And it's like, there is something in the middle where you can be prosperous and spiritually aware and responsible and successful and wealthy and live in luxury while not putting others through suffering. And you know what I'm saying? And so that was the first thing. And then the second thing I said was the idea that I have it figured out. And in that moment, a light bulb went off because I realized there are these spiritualists that I look up to on, social media. They have their own platforms or whatever. And I'm starting to kind of recognize that there's in there being a pendulum shift from the equation of poverty equals spirituality or like wisdom or even more so than wisdom, what's that word for ascendance, right? Poverty and ascendance. There's this influx of abundance and prosperity gospel that's present in the spiritual space, where it almost seems like people follow their spiritualist or their guide based on whether or not they've told them, I make 6 figures now, my life is so abundant because I just leaned into my spirituality and made content. And it's like, there's a lot of overlap in what you just said. Like, making content is a way to get that 6-figure income. The spirituality has nothing to do with that. There are people who are making that and more with no spirituality involved at all. So to make a correlation confuses your audience because it's like, oh, okay, so you're telling me if I just focus really hard on the spiritual progression of things and I make myself a better person and I'm more resilient, spiritually, so on and so forth, the $1 million opportunity is going to show up. And I feel like I'm digging into some of the dangers of those perceptions and kind of trying to figure it out for myself. Because we talked about, I think we might have mentioned on the last joint, like, bro, I don't have it all figured out. Like, I'm still struggling in a lot of areas of my life, particularly financially. I shouldn't say in a lot of areas of my life. Financially, there's been a persistent obstacle. Finances have been a persistent obstacle for me in my life because I'm a victim of my circumstance. Like, I was literally, we were talking about entitlement. I was born into a thing where you're striving to have your basic needs met, as opposed to whatever striving can be once you have that done. But I'm looking at people for an idea of like what, I don't know, humility maybe looks like, or meekness. I'm looking at people who were born into far better circumstances, who were born into far more, ownership or equity around what they're living in, and trying to use that to determine where I'm at spiritually. And so in recognizing like, yo, that ain't right. Like that actually doesn't make sense. That doesn't equate. The dynamic needs to change. The paradigm needs to change. And so I'm in the process of figuring out like, what does a change paradigm look like? What does it look like to not associate my level of spiritual maturity with my level of economic engagement?
Two things, right? So one, just had this conversation with somebody.
Okay.
We're just like, we're not doing the same things that they're doing.
Yeah.
So to have the same expectations as far as results, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Two, if we're not doing this for money, then what's the point? Like, what are the benefits of spirituality if it's not money?
And I think that drives home something that the more I dig into these modalities around like manifestation and energy manipulation and stuff, it's like, okay, energy is not created or destroyed, which means by definition it has to be exchanged, transmuted. There has to be a transaction. The transaction has to occur. Even when you talk about like alchemy and energetic principles and stuff like that, it's like everything has a cost. So to shrink back from the idea of cost, as well as the idea that by acknowledging that capitalism might be detrimental or evil, doesn't take away from the idea that the world has made a consensual decision to engage with it. And so my responsibility is not to interrupt that consensual agreement, but operate through it out of essentially respect. And I don't mean in the sense of like uphold it.
Yeah.
But there's like, I feel like people create this false binary where it's like, oh, well, if you're aware, you should shrink back from engaging as much as possible, which then indicates that people who are not aware, again, false parallel. Not being aware must lead to some level of like financial success. And it's like, yo, what if the people who have it are just aware that two things can exist at the same time and they keep their spirituality to their fucking self? And I think that's something that I'm just like, I'm learning to engage with in terms of setting expectations for my experience. And kind of removing the reflex of entitlement, or the thought that I could be moving in a space of entitlement, because most of the information that's given to me to even support that comes from the same group of people that benefit from me believing, oh, I'm being entitled if I decide that I want to not worry about whether or not I'm making rent this month. It's like, no, there are great people who don't look at their bank accounts because they don't have to be concerned. Like things just run, and they continue. I deserve that. Like, what about that person exists that's not present in me that I wouldn't deserve it? So if I acknowledge that, the deserving bit, I think, becomes like the first part. The rest of it, I haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah.
Like, what happens once you figure out you deserve it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So many people have watched 1.5 million views of people mainly looking at their life path number on my page and being very uplifted or what's the word?
Encouraged?
Affirmed.
Affirmed?
Right? So they come, they look for their life path number. Oh, I'm life path 7. The majority of the comments are like, oh my God, this makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
Like everything in your life makes sense up to now because you have this number? that's awesome. Like, I'm really happy for you.
Yeah.
But now what? Like, is life done for you now because you figured it out? That's it? Like, all right, well, now it's going to be this forever. It's like, yo, these are frameworks for understanding, but they're not frameworks for figuring yourself out.
Yeah.
Same thing with astrology. It's like saying that you're a Leo or a Sagittarius or whatever is not the end-all be-all for you exhibiting certain personality traits. It's meant to be a guide so you understand why you continue maybe showcasing certain personality traits that don't always benefit you.
Yeah.
So you can acknowledge, like, oh, this is a reflex for me. It goes deeper than just because I was born on this day and this is where the stars were, but like, this is a reflex. I can use the system to acknowledge those reflexes and then resist. And through resistance, you gain strength. It's where band training comes from, pulley training comes from. So it's like to resist that natural, or I shouldn't say natural, but to resist the ease of giving into that reflex versus creating force and power and strength by turning away from it.
Yeah, because like now you can really start making decisions.
Right. Fully empowered.
Yeah.
There's no like shrinking back of like, oh, I'm not supposed to, or maybe this isn't good. It's like, no, I'm like fully aware of who I am. I'm fully aware of like the majority of the things that I even shrink back from be the idea that I would somehow abuse a thing. The fact that the thought of abuse is present is what would prevent you from abusing the experience. So
we would hope.
But I can afford to find out.
Yeah.
You dig what I'm saying? It's like sitting there endlessly struggling over like, oh, should I, shouldn't I? Yeah. Bro, I can afford to find out and deal with the consequences afterwards and kind of just move from there. I trust myself to be someone of, what's the word? Someone of integrity. So it's like in the pursuit of ease, in the pursuit of wealth and luxury, which I'm just going to start being very open about wanting, I can afford to trust myself with integrity. Yeah. Because that is at the forefront. These are the roads by which I've determined I will reach this destination. Yeah.
And then I think that's what we said in the last jump too, is just like, like the amount of time that you've spent focusing on other people has given you space that when you do think about yourself, that other people are already being considered as well.
Yep.
It's like you've shown that again and again and again and again. And it's like, okay, bet. Do I now have the capacity to look after self and others? The only other piece of the equation is now self.
Right.
Like I have to look at self and see if I still have the capacity to look at others as well. But if I never look at self, I'll never know if I have that capacity or not.
It's like one of the biggest things that I point out. Shout out the Tarot Club, but in the Tarot theory, there's one of the people in there. Everyone in there practices on some level, or is learning. And so one of the people in there is like leaning into his mediumship, right? And so every once in a while, he's popped in and been like, hey, I had an experience with like the spirit who showed up, and they were this and they were that, and and like all that is well and good, right? But for me, I recalled when that first started occurring for me, I was really caught up in like the implied speciality of my involvement. So like, ooh, I'm a medium. Ooh, the spirit came to me to tell me, ooh, I am the keeper of like, you start feeling like Anubis. You know what I mean? I can just call up the dead and so there's the ego part, but the other part of it is like the assumed responsibility that because someone came to you, because the spirit came to you and they're stressed out, they're worried, they need peace or whatever, it's your responsibility to provide it. They had a life here. That was their opportunity. We can help, but assuming that everyone who knocks on your door, you have some sort of moral obligation to open the door as a medium, let them into your vessel, which is like, especially with a lot of mediums, there's no consent. And they've gotten so used to being possessed or channeled in a moment and that being some sort of like benefit to others that it doesn't occur to them like, bro, that's a sacred vessel. You're just gonna allow spirits to just run through here? for me, it's just like any other type of like intimacy, the trust is paramount. If we don't have a relationship, I don't trust you enough to use my vessel. You could tell me and we can build trust by communication, building a relationship, and you seeing that I'm going to honor what you said to say. You don't need to say it. That's a control thing. Ego exists in the spiritual realm too. And so it's like, nah, bro, you had an opportunity for a vessel, or you got to wait for your next turn, or whatever it is that you choose to believe in. But this is mine. This is sacred. And I don't need to, I'm not required to, and it's not a moral obligation or a moral, say, like championing to allow that process to happen just indiscriminately. So like, I mean, side note to any mediums out there, like, take ownership of your vessel. That shit is yours. Don't just let folk come in and use it. Like, create systems of accountability, of consent. You have the power to do that. It's as simple as you stating, my vessel will not be used outside of my permission. Mm-hmm. All right, now it's dead. Like, granted, just expressing it, like there's like meditative, you're focused on that thing. Yeah. But once you make that declaration for yourself in terms of the dominion that you have, like, that is what we're brought into this world with. You got the dominion to be like, you know what? No, I'm not going to channel that. Okay. But it's been, that was a journey for me, just because I remember at one point, like I said, bro, I was like, oh, I'm a fucking keeper of the dead. And there's a lot of like media that reinforces that, right? Yeah. So it's like the Constantines and the fucking like Death Note and like all these other things that just showcase this person is tasked with being the bridge and it's their destiny and they're supposed to unlock something for the whole world and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what if it's just about you? Yeah. If it's not about anybody else, it's not about saving the world, it's not about destroying the systems that exist. Even when we look at history, the destroying of the system occurs far after the death of the revolutionary. Like, it doesn't get knocked down and rebuilt in one go. It takes several generations of leadership usually for the changes to occur. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like an overall message to just operate in your capacity. I'm stealing your words now, but that shit, it's really sticking with me. Yeah. Matter of fact, can you say what you said about the capacity thing? Because you were talking about how, like, projections of expectations versus actual capacity, and how you'll feel if your expectations are here and your capacity's here.
I guess
dissonance.
So another way that I've said it is just like if you go to a restaurant and you have high expectations, mm-hmm. and they don't meet your high expectations, like a lot of times, nah. I guess it's just like you have a certain capacity to reach, to get to get what you're expecting, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have a certain capacity to get what you're expecting, in the sense of like, I was born with this, and I'm having a tough time getting back here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, you know what the capacity to get this thing is like. Do you have the capacity to get this thing right now? A lot of times be like, oh nah, bro, like I'm mm-hmm. fucking tired. Mm-hmm. The capacity I have right now can get me at a level close, but not quite. And like, fuck it, I'll rock with that for now until I build up the strength to go get that thing again, or to go get something completely different. Because the capacity that you had to get to that level of expectation isn't the limit on your capacity. It's just what you had then. So like, if you keep doing what you have the capacity for now, you're building strength. Yeah. Because endurance is its own strength as well. Right. Right? So being able to do something for a long period of time is its own level of strength. So you're building strength, and all of that endurance, like connected in one show of strength, can be greater than what you had the capacity to achieve before. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I bet I'll keep going for the long haul, and then at one point I'm going to see if I have new strength in a different direction. Like instead of my strength being long ways, maybe if I point it upward, maybe I'll be able to get higher than what I was able to get the first time I jumped or something.
Yeah, no, it makes me think of, I want to say it's a Greek myth of, I don't remember the name of the character, but he pushes a stone up.
Oh, Atlas. No,
Atlas holds the earth. There's a guy, they talk about pushing the stone up the hill, and at the end of the day, the hill rolls, the boulder rolls back down.
Yeah.
Which is, that's pessimistic. But my point being, like, if you were at the bottom of the hill, to your point about capacity, if you're at the bottom of the hill and you go, I need to get this stone to the top of the hill, and your only perceived way of moving the stone is to throw it, the amount of strength needed when your start point is, whether you can start, changes exponentially when you go, but what if I just like push it? What if I put it on a contraption and pull it? You know what I'm saying? What if I put it in a cart and attach that to a horse and have the horse pull it? There's so many ways for you to get the stone up the mountain. But if you're focused on, not even focused on, I think if you obsess over ego to the point where you're like, I should be able to throw this stone to the top of the hill. And it's like, should you? Where did that come from? Have you even seen someone do that? Or, to your point about like strength and power, do you just have an assumption that things are supposed to be like a one-shot kill? And if it's not that, it's somehow a failure. It's like, the goal was to get the stone to the top of the mountain. As long as progress is occurring, it's occurring. But the guy who's still trying to gather his strength to throw it has been at the bottom of the hill for 3 days now. And I'm I'm like halfway up the hill, 3/4 up the hill. So, I feel you.
His name was Sisyphus.
Sisyphus, you're right. Man, we are smart.
No, I Googled that shit.
Oh, you did?
I mean, yes, we are smart. We know where to find the solutions to the problems.
There it is. Like, why? And there it is. Another perfect example. Why would intelligence?
Yeah, smart is not having to know everything.
Right.
It's knowing where to find shit.
That's recall.
Yeah.
A lot of people got recall with no intelligence or no intellectuality. Intellectuality. No, Stamp. That makes sense. And honestly, like I said, man, like I had a rough morning with capacity and outcome. So the conversation alone has just been healing. I hope for people who listen, this is as impactful or half as impactful. Because if not, me and you have been having some fabulous therapy sessions.
My first response, man, fuck them niggas.
Hey, if you don't grow up in this, you don't learn something. Yeah, fuck them niggas, bro.
It's not for y'all, nigga.
Yeah, facts.
We just talking.
But I think for me, again, the fact that it is pouring into me as much as it is, the fact that you are getting as much out of it, as much value out of it as you are, it's sufficient.
Yeah.
Like it don't need to be anything else. Because to your point about even, I don't remember if I said this last episode, but in getting into the space, which was really what social media did, is it allowed me to see that other people were demonstrating the importance of their knowledge and their behaviors and actions spiritually, and it was valuable to other people. Versus like, I guess like my general assumption, which is like, man, I'm the only one who cares about this shit.
Yeah.
But through that, it created like a mirror of the effect rather than the cause. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is valuable, and so I should experience the same thing. And to your point about not wanting to be in the same space, it was like, no matter how many viral videos I get, equating that to more bookings is silly, because I don't have an endpoint of wanting more bookings or constant bookings of like one-to-one sessions. It's like, that's not impact.
Yeah.
I think part of what's tough for me is I don't know the hill I'm pushing up.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what's at the top of the hill. I know I'm supposed to be going up this hill. I don't even see another hill to go up. But I do not know what I'm moving towards. I have no idea what this is going to look like at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But
This nigga, how you jump off a cliff and look into land already?
You know what I'm saying? It's like, you don't want to soar for a while? Like, flap. Nigga, like, don't just glide out. And so it's like, in that, it's, yo, you know what? I'd much rather have a trajectory where my peak happens right before I'm out of here than peak at this point and then everything else is a chase.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For the rest of my life, bro. I can't imagine that misery of just the cat.
Being a child star, bro.
Oh.
Constantly looking for that same rush of like,
right.
Dang, people like me?
That's what I was
constantly looking for that jump, but also trying to find yourself through that.
I was, so one of the projections that I was talking about was like, I'm watching this interview with Drake. I know. Listen, I like his music and he's entertaining to listen to. But he was talking about how much success or like money he's experienced. And then the person was like, you know, how do you feel about getting married or whatever? And his response was, I don't want to disappoint somebody. Mm-hmm. Right? So one, I found that funny because it's like, if you wanted to do it, you would do it because you did this other thing that a lot of people get disappointed by and you achieved it. So you have an internal thought process like, it's like, yo, I can do this, but I won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
Which is very you-based. That's an internal thing that you got to figure out. But as he was talking and kind of like giving more, albeit a little, but giving more insight into his life, mm-hmm. It's like he knows he has a lot of money. He probably doesn't know the exact amount. Who knows the last time he even checked his bank account, right? Pay people to do that. He knows that he's extremely talented at what he does and that there's an inherent value to what he does because he did it. So if he puts out a song and does like 1 billion streams, he's like, yep, right on point. In the interview, the way he was talking about how certain songs came to him, like she asked where the like Kiki, do you love me thing? And he was talking about the girl, like she was asking facetiously, but she was like, so does Kiki love you or whatever? He was like, I mean, I'm sure she's fond of me, but like, probably not. Like, and he gave the story. It was this girl that he was talking to at the time, and it was kind of like a joke, like, oh, you won't write a song about me? And he was like, watch this. And like, and the song does like these numbers and da-da-da, and all this stuff, right? So there's two ways of looking at it. The first way where you're like, yo, that's amazing. Like, this nigga just made a song and it was practically a joke. And people just internalize it and take it and go. And then the other part of it is like, bro, you're the biggest artist in the world and your art doesn't matter. There's nothing in it. Mm-hmm. You're not even expressing anything. You're just telling a joke. And the action of you putting out art has been reduced to the commercial value of what occurs afterwards. Mm-hmm. What's occurring in the in-between? And I don't want that. No matter how great the lifestyle sounds and like the ability to go here, do this, buy this, be this, blah, blah, blah. Bro, the emptiness of not actually being able to express anymore because everything has become a game of whether or not I can make something rhyme or make it catchy or mm-hmm. make other people sing it. That's crazy to me. I don't actually want that. But at one point I was like, yo, this career, I want to do it. I want to be the biggest. I want to do this. I want to do that. For me, it's like, that nigga's still young. He's the biggest artist in the world. That's it. There's nowhere else to go. It is an inevitable downfall, which isn't to like wish that on him, but anything that occurs as time goes on will not be the peak that has already occurred. You cannot get bigger than the biggest artist in the world. The only thing you could do is like fall and then come back, mm-hmm. but eventually someone else will take the spot and you'll be gone.
Yeah, in that capacity though, but like we were talking about our platonic relationships.
Yeah.
His platonic relationship with himself could go deeper.
Right.
And so like if the depth of him hasn't been fully explored, mm-hmm. those are the, hopefully those become the new peaks.
The opportunities for,
so like the opportunity to become
new peaks
like,
and new journeys.
More familiar with self as
right.
You are no longer the thing that you've been for all of this time.
And that's why I feel like what saves him, because everything that we're saying is a projection. I don't know that nigga.
Yeah,
right? That nigga could be ecstatic about his life. Like, he doesn't require the same things for meaning in his life that I do.
Yeah.
But I did say, let's say this, if I were in his shoes, at this point, the singular thing that would have saved me is the birth of my child. Mm-hmm. Because up to that point, the fuck am I even doing this for anymore? You know what I mean? Now it's like there's a reason. Let me inspire him. Let me allow him to see that anything he wants to do, he's not limited by. Mm-hmm. I've had to undo trauma of seeing my dad not be able to do things that he wanted to do, and then internalize, I may not be able to do everything that I want to do. Yeah, I can't imagine the gift of having someone be able to showcase, whatever. Yeah, you can get it done. That's super fucking valuable.
No, facts.
But everyone has their own journey.
No, facts, bro. Because, like, then you get to a point, you be like, with parents, you be like, bro, you're not even doing half the shit I'm doing, nigga.
Facts.
What the fuck do we even have to talk about?
Niggas judging, and it's like, bro, you been, like, I don't think I want to put my dad out there like that. But there's just certain things that it's like, I'm sure that there's judgment or critique or like, hey, you could be doing this better, or I'd rather you did this. But you say it all the time, like, that destination is not where I want to be. That's not the destination I envision for myself. And as a matter of fact, it falls so short of what I do envision, it's an insult for me to take that on. Why the fuck? But to say that, the pain that you can cause your parent by saying, like, the max that you experience, not good enough for me.
No, but I had this conversation with one of my friends about this, like, definition of enough. And, like, I think one of the hopes of parents is, like, providing enough. Yeah. And it's like, what if you remove that expectation, right? That you'll be able to provide enough. Yeah. If you're just like, no, bro, I want to provide what I have the capacity to provide. Yeah. And then it's like, now the conversations that you're having is like, when you're talking to your kid, you're like, is this enough? Is this enough? Is this enough? It's like, bro, like, that's not even the expectation.
Yeah. He wouldn't even know how to answer the question.
Like, just provide what you have.
Right. No, as I say all the time, my dad did the best he could with what he had.
Yeah. But then, like, sometimes the expectation that your best will be good enough for someone else, like, that's just an unrealistic expectation.
It is, bro, but I have my own, like, I have a lot of pains with that. Yeah. Everything from not being good enough to have the relationships that I saw other people having when I was growing up in school. Like, I was heavily bullied and all that other shit. It'd be the thing that, like, I'm not trying to even big myself up, but it definitely is a thing that a lot of people are like, bro, I don't even see it. I'm glad you don't. I'm really glad you don't. I'm glad you don't see a world where I could have not been stylish or cool or well-spoken or whatever, but it did exist. It did, in fact, I can assure you, it happened, and it sucked, right? And there was a very long time of my best not being good enough, not being considered good looking, not being considered cool, not being considered, I wouldn't even say talented, because when I was in school, there was a different correlation with artistic talent. So a lot of it factored into sexuality. If you were a singer and a dancer and into theater, so, you must be gay. Which we don't even need to parse that out right now.
No,
but,
no.
but in that feeling of like, my best not being enough, fairness is the word that comes to mind. And I have a lot of trouble with fairness. I think because of the experience of being black in America, surrounded by white people. I was brought up in a diverse but heavily white area. I say diverse because I've been to other places in the country and I recognize the lack of diversity elsewhere, and it's like it would be ungrateful of me and dismissive of me to pretend.
Oh, right, like, niggas grew up in Oklahoma.
Yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, bro, I've been to Oklahoma. That shit was different. I grew up in a super diverse neighborhood. But like, while that diversity was present, there was still classism, and that classism hedged racism behind it. And so, in seeing that the fairness of the best not being enough, due to lack of resources, circumstances, education, head starts, all that stuff, it has a really dirty, nasty taste in my mouth around that. Like, yo, I tried my best, and it's like,
okay.
Oh well.
You want to do better?
And it's like, dog, I don't know. I honestly, even right now, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that.
It's because that's, for me, right, that's a feeling that makes me strive.
That your best wasn't good enough?
Yeah. It does one of two things. One, if it's something that I really want to do, I'll strive at it, right? To give more than what I strive to give more than what would be my best. Like, it's just like, no, nigga, you don't have the capacity to give more than your best.
Right.
Like, you've given it everything.
Yeah, but it's like, in striving, you'll absolutely hit the mark.
Yeah, but also, or it completely stops me from doing things. Because I'm like, damn, if I have to give my best to everything, I can only do one thing at a time. Right? Where it's just like giving everything every time.
Yeah.
It's like, no, bro, like, I got 10% for this today.
Or, I mean, right now what it's pointing out is like, do I need to give that 10% if that's what I have? Can I afford myself the grace to go, I'm gonna get to that tomorrow because I'll be able to put the effort that is worth the thing. Like what you're saying has brought up, and obviously there is no blanket understanding for anything that gets said like that, but what I'm pulling from that is presence. So I'm aware that some of the things that I'm insecure about or worried about are on my mind when I'm doing other things. And I can only imagine how poorly this recording would go if I was thinking about what jobs I'm going to apply to later. You know what I'm saying? Ooh, sure.
He's just looking around. He's curious. So many things are much bigger than him, so he's just like...
Fair enough.
What the fuck?
The fuck is this? But yeah, am I giving my best in any particular moment if I'm distracted and not fully present?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So I guess the correlations that I was making, I was like, do I have to give my best all the time? Like, is that required for the outcomes that I'm expecting? And so the other thing, like, because the other thing that I correlate with best is perfection.
Right.
That's where, for me, that correlation doesn't have to exist.
Yeah, because my correlation with best is capacity.
Yeah.
So, like, I tried my best, this is what I had, and all of it is gone.
Yeah. So my correlation for best also is perfection. Got it. And so it's like, that's where I'm like, okay, do I have to give my best? In other words, do I have to be perfect every time?
Yo, you know what's really funny about it?
What?
There's like a reverse internalization. So you say the thing, and what I hear is, yo, I gave everything I had, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That same phrase sounds like what you hear is, I gave everything I had and it still wasn't perfect. Yeah. And that's not what I hear, and that's not where my fairness thing comes in. Because the perfection thing for me, even when I hear perfect, right? I actually love that we're getting into this. So people say off the time, it's like, perfect world, perfect this, perfect that. I'm like, yo, the perfect world is the world that you live in. Yeah. Because it perfectly responded to all input and provided what occurs. Yeah. Anything else, projection. It's imagination. You made it up. And if it was possible to achieve that at the point in time that you're observing it, it would have been. Because it's not, the thing you're calling perfect is projection, not perfection. Perfection is exactly what occurred. Because if we said, yo, I wanted this plant to grow like this, success. Perfect. Yeah. So because of my internalization of perfect, which took a long time, because the whole religious thing. So God being perfect, you assume God is good all the time. And it's like, depends on the framework that you encompass with good
Yeah.
and all the time. Because if we look at all the time, it leads to my understanding of perfect. This is exactly how it was supposed to be. But from the perspective of the individual, yo, God can't possibly be good all the time. Bad things happen to me all the time. And it's like, it depends on, I guess, like your end game of good or your end game of perfection. If you have an end game where you're afforded the, I guess, like the expectation, good all the time is you're always looking at that. So you're like, all right, eventually we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But if it's based in the now, it's never going to be present.
Yeah.
It's always going to be some fictional, it's really critique and lack of gratitude. But like perfect and God and all this, it's a really weird area of conversation. I think because English is just not,
It's very limited.
particular enough. Yeah, it's not expressive enough to really.
Even like when we just had the conversation of like enough and perfect, it's like,
Right.
I need to know how you define stuff before we can have like an in-depth conversation.
Yeah.
Like, be like, okay, like,
Oh, bro, I see it happen. The funniest thing in the world is watching people in the comments. I wanted to bring this up too because it was a similar thing. So I was on Instagram the other day. I'm a fan of Pete Holmes. I think he's hilarious. This is like white dude. Does a lot of like kind of dad joke or reality comedy, like the absurdity of the real world kind of thing. So he's having a discussion with another comedian. I don't know the guy. I forget his name. But he's having a discussion, bro. I'm close. About, he goes, yo, isn't it crazy that heroin doesn't work? Right? And what his point was, there's this thing that is designed to make you feel amazing, like just happy, euphoric, right? But it doesn't work because it's not sustainable. But in seeking out that feeling in sustenance or in sustainability, there's suffering all along the way.
Yeah.
And so the guy was talking about how it was like this, he was like, oh, it's kind of like a cruel joke or a trick played by God. The wildest part about that conversation to me was going in the comments and seeing how many people were arguing about God. And I'm like, bro, what did you missed? The whole conversation was about understanding that joy in the capacity of like all of it right now, not sustainable and will probably kill you. And over the course of time, you'll feel it, but it'll come with abundant amounts of suffering in between.
Yeah.
And pain and, well, not even the suffering so much as struggle.
Yeah.
And so to see a fucking comment section chock full of people arguing about the existence of God, whether or not God was, some people thought that God was being compared to heroin. Like, it was just like, yo, we are not even on the same page. And then on top of that, this is a clip of a conversation that holds much more context than can be encompassed in the minute and 30 seconds that we're seeing. So for you to go off on this whole thing about whether or not God is this, that, and the third, fucking wild. And it's like people, English, because of its structure, lends itself to miscommunication, confusion, and lack of unity.
Yeah.
And it even highlights how the Western world, like that highlight on individualism and lack of unity leads to the suffering of everybody. And that's why I think nationalism has become such a turn. It's just that in America it doesn't translate because none of us are actually from here, except for the natives. But like, I told you about that clip in Italy where they had like a procession, and it's like everybody, no one's home that day. Everyone is in town. Everyone is Italian. Everyone is singing the same song. Everyone's having the same celebration. And that is such a foreign concept to me because I live in America where football, like, nah, not even. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, yo, that's wild. Like, I'm envious of that experience, that cultural experience of unity, where it's like, nah, we all see the world this way, not because it's because it fulfills us or because it feeds us, not because this is the way it has to be seen.
All right, bro. I think we good.
Yeah, no, we bounced around today. This felt like more of our conversations, like the shit that happens off camera. But I fuck with it, bro. I want to say I appreciate folks continuing to show up, click the links, watch the stuff. Yeah, man, I'm gonna keep showing up. So I'm hoping that people continue to show up, but we are gonna find out what's at the top of this hill together, hopefully. To everybody who will make it with me.